The hell is going on there? Don't explode. I'm really bad at maintenance on this truck, meaning like I don't do it. All right, gang. Well, take a look at that cap. I don't know which was the chicken or the egg of failure here, so consider hitting that subscribe button. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Between the Sharks. We got a special episode here. I gotta prepare for power tour. It starts in my hometown, so I thought might as well give it a whirl. I meant to go last year and it worked, and that was dumb. While everybody hit Atlanta last year and it was 105 degrees, well, I was driving this thing around 100 miles a day, and yeah, it overheated. Yep, that's right, I said power tour. This tired old inline six is probably gonna be pulling triple digits in the timing slips. Nope, she hasn't had a tune-up or an oil change in a couple of years. If she did, you'd have seen it. That's all right, I've put some effort into it to get it ready. See, we focused here on the important stuff. Giving out hot dogs, you see? We've got a propane tank, a grill, an umbrella, condiments, chips, cooler for drinks, hot dog buns steaming in the sun, and a cooler full of hot dogs. I think I got my priorities straight. Oh yeah, and this umbrella for shaditude. Look at those little fellers ready to go. And I ain't kidding. Even got plates and a hand washing station. So the plan here, if you could call it that, is to, well, give away a bunch of hot dogs and maybe meet some folks. I don't know a single person going on the power tour, but I like hot dogs, and if you like hot dogs, then we'll probably have something in common enough to be friends, I think. Let alone the fact that it's a power tour and it's all a bunch of hot rods, so obviously we got that in common too, so we'll probably be besties forever. Now, considering I got my priorities straight, we should, you know, go ahead and talk, because the smell of hot dogs makes everything less painful. We do really actually need to do some stuff to this truck. Probably, maybe. I drive it every day without doing anything, so can't say I'm all that worried, but I got a couple of legal issues I ought to take care of. First one starts right here. That turn signal, I've replaced it twice, but I don't really know what steering column this is. The Bubba's what had it before me didn't leave me any notes, but it's definitely not a 65, 66. So, but the thing about that is once this thing is all busted, means the old brake lights are not really working so good. Considering we're gonna cross through several states, it's probably best to stay on the right side of the authorities there and at least get the brakes working. The guy can use the old, you know, mechanical sort of turn signals. As far as performance upgrades to make sure we can do this road trip and really smoke the tires, we got some brand new wiring in here. Got a brand new e-brake. Under the hood we got a brand new big old aluminum V8 radiator. The problem is the fan for the inline six doesn't really line up with the center of that. We got a zero restriction air cleaner. We got self-changing oil, fancy coolant reservoir, heater, aka additional radiator for overheating. Got these Poindexter edition tape on your glasses windshield wipers. Got a lock-in gas cap for safety. Hate somebody stealing that 87 octane. Got a little brown dog coffee sticker. So we will be dealing with some of these odds and ends, but if you see this big green pickup truck, smells like hot dogs, and you see an umbrella, come get one. Hopefully I got plenty for everybody. Come say hello. And then, you know, we'll fix a couple of little things around here. My philosophy on most of it is, if it's working, don't mess with it. Even if it's not working great. If it's just actually working, leave it alone. The turn signals is the one where, well, that could get me pulled over any day of the week. Not the turn signals so much, but the brake lights, that could get me pulled over anytime, anywhere, and probably ought to. And, well, you know, that's not the kind of attention I want. Especially, I never want attention from the state. So, we will be fixing those shortly. And then we'll probably be turning a blind eye to 98% of everything. All right, gang, welcome back. Let me tell you something about this truck. So no sooner than when I mentioned power tour, after showing off our whole hot dog arrangement, we fired her up and decided to head for home. And if the drive shaft didn't about fall out right then. Now, some of you guys may be saying, that's Murphy's Law, man. You said it out loud, and then all of a sudden things started falling apart. But no, not this truck. You see, she's watching out for me because 4 years ago, it fell out. Mostly the carrier bearing just fell out. And I barely cobbled it back in there, and I held it on with a C-clamp, and it kept me going, commuting, daily driver commuting for 4 years. And it heard power to her, and it said, might be time to fix that properly. So instead of sending me down the road and kicking it out somewhere in God knows where, tossed it out half a mile from home. Limped her home. It's time to fix it. Let's make it right. Well, I'm here on the ground to show you something that you guys just can't see, so let's figure this out. What I can show you though is that when you lower your pickup truck just a little bit, it's a little more difficult to get under. So I have a lift and I'm doing calculus on workitude. Like, is it going to be easier to move the Model T off the lift and get this on and do what I need to do? Or is it going to be easier to just do it on my back? Dang it. Say the weather's supposed to hold, but it is, you know, late spring in the southeast here, so trust no one. Let's see what we got to work with here, because the reality is we got a couple options here. We got the driveway, which is not so good. We've got this garage, which is nice to have, and it's full of all the tools we need. But we got Project A, which we can clean all this up, drop it down. We have the steering together enough at this point to maybe sneak it out of here and then winch it back on later. Or we could move the old Cadillac out and just do it on the floor on our backs, which isn't the world's worst option. I'm not really sure which is more. You know what? We should just clean up anyway, because what the hell's all this anyway? All right, so I was gonna say the garage is now tidier, but the reality is the crap's just out of the way, and you know, it's in an equally untidy place elsewhere, scattered around the garage. So now the trick is, I gotta get this thing out of here and off into the yard that's full of junk, but like this away or that away, just enough that we can get the truck by it, but also hopefully not so far that we have to push it back. We do have the winch, but you know, that thing operates way better in more of a straight line, and we only have 50 feet of cable, and it's about 24 feet to the door. So just, you know, I can keep it in mind. I'm not really sure how much it will affect anything. I kind of have this thing steering. I've been working really hard on the steering system. I did make a little bit of a miscalculation on how these joints worked. So I cut this shaft down a little more than I wanted to for reasons of angleitude. I thought I was binding, but I was, which were the wrong reasons. But anyway, so this thing, my center support bearing is not bolted down. So the steering does do some loop-de-loops, but we are attached to tie rods and steering box. So in theory, it does kind of steer. Now, there's an irony in the fact that I haven't done the center support bearing on this, because that's literally what's giving it up in the truck. However, it's not the steering one, it is the drive shaft one. So, I was wondering where those clamps were. While this car is technically Flintstone powerable, that seems just like a really good way to break your ankle or something, or get some body part or extremity caught under the car and just, you know, get folded in a way that you don't want to get folded. So I got to figure out how to get her rolling. Yep. Gang, this is dumb. Rear brakes are tight. It's out of the garage now, but right where it needs to not be. Looks so tiny out here in the wild. It's crazy. crazy. Just such a change of perspective. I'm just walking around it because I've never really had it out this far. Still pretty cool. However, we are not here to lay our eyes on that beautiful piece of machinery. We need to give some love to Old Reliable here. So the thing is, you'll get a good look at this thing, what needs repair here in a second, but the drive shaft is all flopping around. Like, because it's a two-piece drive shaft, and the middle is no longer connected to anything, so it's all just loop-de-looping in the path of least resistance. So we have to apply the least amount of, I don't know, torque, force, gas, you name it, in getting this thing from here back there. What the hell is going on there? Anyhow, I limped it back about a half a mile and it didn't quit on me, but we're gonna have to dive in. There's a 68.763% chance this is gonna turn into a much bigger deal, but we'll see. So the drive shaft is gonna turn anytime the rear wheels turn, so even just rolling it is tricky. Here we go. You might be able to hear it clunking. Hold together, baby. Hold together. The other thing is, take note of this exhaust noise. And we're gonna get in there, we're gonna change the exhaust gasket too, if I remember. I think I bought one. Oh, come on now. Come on now. Don't explode. Woo! I don't know if I want to try to drive it onto the ramp or if I want to pull it with the winch. Oh boy. Oh boy. Come on, baby. All right, gang, it's a little intimidating. I'm not really sure why. I know that the lift is rated for over 6,000 pounds. I know the truck really only weighs about 32 to 3,500 because it has a huge steel plate in the back. Clearly we're still set up for hot dogs. Like I said, it was seriously on the way home. So I gotta chalk these wheels though. One moment. All right, wheels are chalked. This is pretty serious stuff, gang. Always do it anytime you're lifting a vehicle on anything or planning on going under one. That's where all those stories come from, man. People just get rolled over by their own car. And it's not even a joke. So, also, this repair requires us to take the drive shaft out. So even if we were leaving the car in gear, well, as soon as we undo that drive shaft, it doesn't matter anymore. And this has no e-brake, which is a story of other near tragedy because it got torn out by a tow truck driver. Maybe we'll get into that. Maybe we can patch something up. Let's get her in the air. All right, gang, I have never been under this where I haven't just slid myself under on a piece of cardboard. So there is a 76% chance that we are gonna find a bunch of stuff we're gonna have to ignore. But this has been through a lot of Bubba's hands. So let's see what we see. Well, gang, you see here, this is the problem. So apparently this is what we came here to fix. Now, apparently my original solution continued to work. That's 4 years ago. So I guess this bearing finally gave it up. So, and just sheared that right off as soon as it seized. But you can see the whole drive shaft is just doing this right now every time anything turns on this vehicle, which, you know, is not ideal. Here's some broken e-brake cables. Exhaust seems a little smushed. Pinion is slinging a lot of stuff. Shocks are 70 years old. Oh yeah, there's still some of the original wood bed. How about that? Oh, you can kind of see the original green color though. That's cool. Oh God, I don't want to walk further. Well, it's still got the original e-brake stuff in there. We'll talk about that maybe in a little bit. Up front here, we got evidence of some very minor leaks. Liquid undercoating, nothing over here is gonna rust, but we probably ought to check and see if that transmission fluid, see if that transmission has any juice left in it. Leaking plenty of oil on this side. Starter's lubed up though, you can tell there. Put those disc brakes on 6 years ago, maybe more. All right, we got a lot to do. We should get after it. All right, so this is, the original issue I had was these two bolts that thread into this carrier bearing stripped. So it wasn't staying where it needed to stay. So this ingenious solution held for 4 years. Apparently the bearing just seized and snapped right off. So this would have been a significant issue on the side of the road on Power Tour. And you'll, well, hell, anywhere, really. But you'll see why, because we're gonna go through the whole process of replacing it. I have chosen this truck for Power Tour mostly because it's been so reliable, it's been really good to me, and I feel pretty confident fixing it. Now the trick is, I'm really bad at maintenance on this truck, meaning like I don't do it. So while I'm in here, I've got to run the risk of going full blown while I'm in here, because there's probably, well, it needs everything basically, but I drive the snot out of it, over 100,000 miles on it already. All right, so the process of removing the drive shaft should be relatively simple, he said. Basically, I gotta pull these U-bolts, this should move forward and then move back, taking everything with it. But anywhere I may be separating anything at any point in this system, I've put tape at every seam. I've also used a grease pencil. Mark it every way you can, because you want to get it back together just the way you had it, because it might just be balanced that way. Also, be prepared. This is not a good time to be wearing your best Abercrombie & Fitch, because if there's any gear oil left in that transmission, it may kind of start to spew out when I pull that Jimmy Jam out. So I guess we'll get some tools here and get after it. Should be 9/16 this is. All right, gang, the U-bolts are out. That's the easy part. Now this is a step some people miss and then regret. So what we're gonna do is wrap the U-joint caps in tape so that they don't fall out, and so they don't fall off and spill the needle bearings that are inside all over the place, forcing me to go buy new U-joints. Now I'm probably gonna check these out and determine that these U-joints are totally shot, but what I don't want to do is end up in that position because I forgot to use a little tape. Thing just looks cool, man. Dog's here. All right, let's take a closer look at what we've been dealing with. So now we've got to get this two-piece drive shaft apart, which doesn't seem like it'll be any fun. I think what needs to happen is this U-joint actually has to come out. There's a nut here. This guy is splined onto this, then we can knock all this off and then knock that one on and then put it all back together. Simple, right? Sure. Yeah, that's not very good. Also, that one's completely, that cap's just broken right out. So I guess I'll be calling my pals over at the O'Reilly's and seeing what they've got, because that's obviously got to get replaced while we're in there. And I guess I'll inspect these a little closer. It might be worth just doing them all while I'm at it. Don't want to, but don't want to pull this drive shaft out later, and this is my daily, so that may just be the world we're living in. All right, gang, well, take a look at that cap. Take a look at that nug. And on the inside of this part of the drive shaft, we got problems, gang. Think I'm gonna be stuck letting that ride. I'm gonna debate welding up some of that gap and then filing it down. I'm not really sure. In the meantime, I'm gonna go ahead and take this out and deal with it, but I don't know which was the chicken or the egg of failure here. Whether this finally seized up and bound and bit it, and that's what spun this thing. I don't know. It's all bad. And like I said, I'm not mad about any of this. I feel extremely lucky. First of all, it gave it up a half mile from home in a relatively safe place and still got me home and still drove itself all the way onto the lift. It could have happened on the power tour. It could have happened on my commute to work. This drive shaft could have been spinning at 80 miles an hour and just come loose on my way to work and just torn everything up, and I could have lost the drive shaft in like the middle lane of traffic. So it's remarkable how much it held on. It really, like, that's crazy. Considering the shape of the U-joint, that's pretty impressive. All right, so I finally got this bearing off. It's in terrible shape now. I kind of brought a grinder to a bearing fight. The inner race was on there. Heat wasn't really doing it, pounding wasn't doing it, so karate is what ultimately did it. More important things, the truck's all apart, so I gotta jam in some U-joints and see if we can get this sucker back together, because the day's getting on, you know what I mean? All right, drive shaft's kind of back to, how greasy am I? Drive shaft's back to being a drive shaft again. We got a new U-joint here, a new U-joint here. That one seemed pretty good, so we left that one alone. Now we gotta get this thing. I can't believe this is not what failed. I was certain when I ducked my head under there. Dog's not sure about little scooters. With a sidecar, she'd be all right though. Anyway, yeah, I don't like this design at all, because the original problem I had with this is the bolts stripped out. Now, if you have a two-piece drive shaft, this thing has one, the murder van has one. Basically, if it sounds like there's sort of a slightly annoyed tiger under your car anytime the rear wheels are spinning, you might need to look into the carrier bearings. You know, like, not super angry, but that's something else, man. That's a lot of force right there. Sheared that sucker right off. Here's the broken one. And you can see there's like not a lot of thread, maybe 3, maybe 4 threads for the bolts to thread into. That's why I was sure this was stripped. Well, I knew it was stripped actually. But the whole process of getting the bearing off and then hammering a new bearing on, and it's a whole thing. There's some better tutorials on YouTube than I'm gonna do, because they're out there already. But I'm just saying, if you're getting one of these long vehicles, then gotta be aware. This is probably the original though, and it survived, since 1965. So somebody math for me. Theory, if I get the front right, everything else should follow correctly. Where is my mark? Has anybody seen the mark? There we go. There's 1,000 splines on the transmission. Not 1,000, I think it's 28, but don't quote me on that. So if you get it wrong, the way your differential's lined up isn't gonna line up, you know what I'm saying? Well, I have it in neutral, so it doesn't really matter. Why am I fighting? Chalk your wheels. Obviously, this thing being in gear right now would do nobody any good, because there's no drive shaft to hold the wheels in place. But if you leave it in gear, you can't spin the doodad to make everything line up. If you're new to the drive shaft making and installing things, when you got these little whoop-de-doos, there's usually a little nubbin that sticks out. So you want to make sure that your cap is sitting in there. Dog agrees, apparently. All right, team. That's more solider than it was. So the drive shaft's back in, everything's lined up. This tape will fix itself. I did the right thing and actually greased everything, which, gang, don't forget to do that if you're doing U-joints, because if you forget to do that, well, you'll be doing it all over real soon. So I've been letting the oil self-change on this thing for a long time, like many years. But it seems that we have a significant leak right at the oil plug. So we're gonna go ahead and swap the oil out. Bought a new gasket, hopefully that'll solve this problem. I mean, we might have a plethora of oil leaks, but this one we might be able to solve. Got some brand new diesel oil to go in it later. Don't let me forget to put it in before we start the car. Got a brand new Wix filter. Look at that. I even put a Wix filter on before. Vice Grip says they're good. I don't know. Sure. I'm going to go with it. How much are we going to spill? A lot, a little, or all of it? That's not the way it goes. How much oil do we think is in it is the next question. Put that down in the comments. All of it, a little bit of it, or none of it? Well, there's some in there, so that's something. Guess it wouldn't have been leaking if there wasn't. All right, picked up one of these jobbers. Oil pan plug gasket. Looks a lot like this, so we're just gonna swap it out. Hopefully it'll fix something. If it doesn't, we just secondary hope that it doesn't make anything worse. All right, friends and countrymen, we got the new oil plug gasket in. It's tight, so I suppose that's a good thing. New oil filter. Same as the old one, basically. We're gonna put in some 15W40 because this engine is neglected and tired and all of the things. I'm doing this now because if I don't put the oil in now, I may forget to do it entirely, at which point all of this work will be for naught because I will back the truck out with no oil and it will just go ka-thunk. Although, this engine being what it is, it may just continue to run forever. Now, if you've watched enough Vice Grip, and I know that you have, because we all have, he uses this heavyweight diesel engine oil. I'm using the same stuff right now. He always says it's the cheapest, but I don't know if he's bad at volume math or it is also the cheapest, but it's sold by the gallon, which means there's only 4 quarts in there, fellers. So it may be 22 bucks, but you're gonna be short a full quart compared to, you know, your standard conventional motor oil that comes in 5-quart jugs. Just be aware, fellas. So I bought 2 of these because I'm gonna leak out 3 quarts in no time. All right, so we got 5 quarts in the engine now. I'm gonna bring her back up and continue what I was doing. I was afraid if I didn't complete the oil change and I didn't leave a sticky note on the door or the steering wheel, I was gonna start this thing without oil in it, which, gang, we do this as a hobby, so focus may not always be there, especially if we're doing stuff we've done a million jillion times. Speaking of a million jillion times, let's talk about exhaust gaskets. This little donut thing, this truck eats more of them than the average beat cop. I'm not really sure why. This is the collector gasket style for this inline 6. I've replaced the exhaust manifold. I've replaced this thing like a billion times. Most of the time laying on my back with 1,000 extensions. At this point, at least I get to stand up and do it with 1,000 extensions. But hopefully it'll be quieter. I mean, this thing is basically just a tin can, which is cool. It doesn't really have any interior. It's all stamped metal pieces, which I actually do like, but it can be loud in there. And it's better when it's quiet in there. So, you know. All right, I don't know if this is the exhaust system that old Leroy that owned the truck before me put in that's causing these problems or what, but one thing is not like the other, first of all, and second of all, what is going on? I mean, I've put in so many of these things, but this thing is also probably part of the problem, you know? Now, my least favorite job. Gear oil. But judging by the amount of gear oil that's not in the rear end, I'm thinking there may not be that much in there. We're having a similar kind of situation here with the transmission. So on these, it's no big deal. You just pull a little plug out, jam your finger in there and decide if it's touching liquid. But if it's not, you gotta add some. The problem is, this stuff's got a ton of sulfur in it, and it smells like egg farts. All right, what we should see here is a little bit of oozing down, but we don't. So I can jam my finger in there and I can get my whole pinky in and reach down, and I don't have anything on my finger. So we'll call that low. All right, so while I got my fluid pump printer going, let's talk about how this is maybe the world's greatest truck. It is the most forgiving vehicle on the planet, I do believe, because it's got basically no gear oil in the transmission. I'll bet there's none in the rear end. And what I'm saying is, I've replaced the engine, I've replaced the rear end, I've replaced the front brake system, I've cut the coil springs, and yet somehow this truck still has a heart of gold. I mean, it just keeps on giving. And if it never drove itself off this lift, it wouldn't owe me a darn thing. Because some people debate. They say, is the engine the heart of the vehicle? Well, I don't know. In this one, it's not. The heart's in the truck somewhere. Engine's been changed. There's still plenty of heart left. This is a must-have, gang. If you're doing this, trying to get a bottle up there, it's just a good way to pour this crap all over yourself. So, gang, I don't know how low this really was, but my arm's a little sore from pumping. I think that it was pretty close to bone dry. I mean, it's really thick oil, so everything will keep a coating on it, but I don't know what the capacity is, but I put over 2 quarts in there, I'm pretty sure. It's an estimation, but it's I think it's fair. I don't remember if I've ever pulled this plug ever. Maybe when I bought the truck 10 years ago, maybe. Whew. God, this truck deserves so much better. It treats me so well. Let's check the rear end. I put that rear end in a couple years ago. We went from 373s or 411s down to 308s. That's why this truck can do the highway speeds. This is a later model rear end, but it still has, it's a standard 12 bolt for a C10. Same mounting, everything. I don't know how long they did the trailing arms. 6 lug, 308 gears. 308 gears came from the factory for this truck. Guy was parting it out. But I don't know when they started doing 308 gears, if I'm being honest. That's not good either. Oh man, same deal. Whew, all right. All right, gang, it's morning and I got a cup of Little Brown Dog coffee. You want me to cry, Uncle? Cover me in rotten egg smelling thick grease from fingertip to elbow, which is about where I got myself last night. So let's, we got a ton done yesterday, which is pretty big deal, but coming back in this morning, there's just more evidence of what I already knew to be true. Just got a leak or two here. All right, I think all of my Chevrolets have gotten together and bought stock in power steering fluid companies because none of them will hold the stuff anymore. The Trooper has a 4.3 Chevrolet in it. I've replaced the power steering pump. Still just dumps the fluid right out. So I got to dive back into that. This one, it's clearly leaking from the power steering pump, but I also have a strange leak at the front of the power steering box. The pump is in the $100 range. The box is in the hundreds of dollars range. So I've rebuilt it. I've replaced all the guts in here because it used to dump out of there, but I don't know where this is coming from. That's, to me, unusual. Maybe it's maybe that'll take a closer inspection. We'll bring it halfway down and see if we can see the top cover, because maybe it's coming out of there when the fluid's all running around. The pump, I guess we could just replace it. The other thing I have noticed is with all of these cars, the longer you let them sit, the more the power steering gasket seals and stuff, I feel like they shrink a lot and then they swell back up. So the rate of leak is inverse to the amount you drive it, which seems opposite. Also, while we're in here, take a look at my super super solid craftsmanship. So we cut, I think, a coil or maybe a half a coil out of the springs. That was my method of lowering, but we have a ½ inch of travel to the bump stops, basically, on both sides. So, you know, I feel like the bump stops are really the shocks because I never replaced the shocks with shorter shocks. I guess I could cut them off, but, you know, 2 inches of travel is about where it's at, and then it's a hard stop, so... You know, it's one way to lower your truck. I've been driving it like that for 10 years. Also, for you Eagle Eye viewers, we are running disc brakes on this thing, and if I recall correctly, it's the first generation of disc brakes. I bought them off a truck, so this isn't a kit. This is I think this is 69 to 72 stuff. Not 100% sure because it's been a while. Basically it's the spindles, steering arms. This is the adapter that you need that connects the original tie rods with the new spindle parts. I'm not 100% sure how it works, but everything else is bolt in. I just don't remember. I mean, I know how it works enough to have done it and have figured it out and forgotten it because it's just not that complicated. But I will say, driving this thing all the time, the upgrade from the stock drums to the discs, it stops better, but the maintenance is significantly lower. I was tearing up brake shoes in traffic. So this is a worthwhile upgrade if you're gonna have one of these trucks. And I think if you're doing all of this and you want a low truck, maybe the answer is buying proper dropped spindles for this application and ready for disc brakes, because that way you get all the suspension travel, the disc brakes, and you know, that's not going to be your situation. But if you don't have the $300-400 for the spindles, it doesn't ride as bad as it looks like it should ride. That's all I can say about it. It rides relatively well, so not really sure how. But potholes and stuff, you'll feel it in your fillings. All right, we are going to let those leaks ride for right now. I'm going to cogitate what we want to do, if anything, at the moment. I've had very little success replacing entire power steering pumps and whatever and not ending up with a leak. I don't know if it's me, I don't know if it's cheap parts, I don't know if it's a combination. But the other part of our original plan here was to get some kind of an e-brake working. And when I mean e-brake, for this particular type of thing, I'm really talking about a parking brake or an additional parking brake. So anywhere I go, I keep a block of wood in the back, I chalk the wheels, put the car in first gear, and so far, so good. So our method today is to use galvanized aircraft cable, also known as wire rope, and these wire rope clips to extend the existing cables to whatever is left of the original mechanism. This isn't as good as purchasing the original cable setup, but what I can do is kind of patch this together for now, and it should be good enough for a parking lot situation. And then when I do the rear brakes, I'll buy the correct cable and we'll redo all of that. But that's just not on the docket today. So I have full faith in my rigging capabilities. I've done a lot of rock and roll stuff where I know how this stuff works, and I wouldn't recommend it as like, it's more than rated for an emergency situation, and the rate of pull on all of this stuff, it's fine. It really is. It holds speakers and stuff and lighting rigs above your heads. It really does. It's incredibly strong, but just because I'm on the YouTubes and the internets right now, I'm not going to say that this is a great idea, but it's not a bad idea. Anyway, it'll be better than nothing, that's for sure. Whoops. All right, so as I get going on this, I'll tell you a story where I'm pretty sure the truck was given a mission to kill me one day. Thankfully that day has passed and that mission is over, but one day I'm driving home from work. I'm doing 70 miles an hour on the freeway. I come up over a hill, my exit's off to the right, but traffic is at a dead stop about half mile ahead. No big deal, I've got plenty of stopping distance. So I hit the brakes, they get kind of soft. And then I hit the brakes again and I hear a pop and the brakes go straight to the floor. I pump them, nothing happens. So I turn off the ignition and I shift the car into second, trying to slow it down, and I pull off to the side. Now my exit, fortunately, although packed, is a ramp up. And to the side of the ramp is a concrete barricade. So I'm fully committed at this point to, you know, put it into the wall if I have to. So car's off, I'm kind of downshifting, trying to get it to stop. It's not really doing much. At this point, I had in fact injured my back, and so I couldn't reach the e-brake to pull it. So I barely, probably still doing about 45 miles an hour, get to the back end of traffic, and I just swing over into the emergency lane, and I mean, I squeaked by a box truck with like inches to spare. Again, I was gonna put it into the wall before I hit anybody else and just basically run the side of the truck along the wall until it stopped. But I sneak up through, and I managed to start going back uphill, and basically gravity slows the truck down, and I make it about halfway up the exit ramp, blowing by everybody in the emergency lane. Car's in gear, hop out. I chock the wheels with my regular, you know, block in the back. I think I set the e-brake at that point because I could reach it when I stood up. And the front brake line had blown out completely. Now, in theory, a dual master cylinder should leave you the rear brakes. But I had no brakes, so I call a tow truck and I said, hey man, because I realize I'm not going anywhere. There is technically a way you can patch that up on the side of the road. Like you can pinch off one brake line if you absolutely had to. And in theory, if that pinch holds, you can drive it on the other three brakes. But I don't recommend that at all. Just saying, if you had to, being chased by zombies or monsters, that might be a solution for you. Anyway, tow truck driver shows up. We load the truck onto a flatbed. It's the kind of flatbed, you know, with the little square cab where the cab's kind of lower than the bed. He gets the thing hooked up. We drive out. We're driving along. We head down this hill, and all of a sudden, he taps the brakes, and the truck kind of lurches forward. And we're like, you know, the bumper's basically head high. And he looks at me, and he taps the brakes again, and the truck lurches forward. And I said, it's unhooked, isn't it? And he goes, yeah. And we are headed downhill. I mean, careening downhill, and a light turns red. And so basically, he just says, hold on. And he's tapping the brakes. We can't blow through this light because we'll kill somebody. But if we slam on the brakes, maybe the truck goes straight through the guard and basically decapitates us because its bumper is at head height and it's no longer strapped to the truck. And well, the e-brake and the gears aren't really holding it against this force. So somehow the guy manages to like pump the brakes. The truck hits the front guard, but not that hard. So he did slow it down enough. We pull over and he reconnects everything. So, surviving that, this is now the second, what I would consider like, I don't know if it's a near-death experience, but it's certainly a near-catastrophic experience where I was expecting great bodily harm or potentially injury to someone in my immediate vicinity, specifically myself, because you know, I think I got lucky on the highway. I stayed calm. I think I did all the right things, but you know, fortunately I had an opportunity with the exit ramp and having just enough room to squeak through that I didn't have to put it into the wall, didn't hit anyone, didn't, you know, hurt myself or the truck. The truck was going to be first to go, unfortunately, but you know, that's life. But then after it came loose on the tow truck, I was just, I think, overloaded with adrenaline and endorphins or whatever happens after adrenaline. So we get home, I hop out of the truck and I kind of jump to look at the bumper to see if there's any damage, and there's not. And then he goes to unhook the truck, and that's when I realize it's come off again. The back hook was not hooked. It was only on the e-brake cables at that point, which it had torn out of the truck. So I think this might have been the world's worst tow truck driver, even though this was a AAA driver. And, you know, there was really, I mean, there was nothing I could do. I was just polite. I wanted him gone. I was totally wiped out from the whole experience. And then, yeah, that's the story of the old e-brake cable and why we don't have one. But we're kind of cobbling something together now. Let's see if we can make it work. All right, I'm gonna give you a brief rundown on what we're doing here. We are basically extending the wire rope that's attached to the e-brake system in the rear wheel with more wire rope. Now, the way we're doing that is using wire rope clamps, which are like so. These are legit, they are rated. You can swage this stuff on, but this is an option. Thing is, if you're gonna use these, you gotta use them right. There's a little U-bolt that runs through a saddle. So what they say is never saddle a dead horse. So if you have a loop like this, you have a dead end, like so, a loop, and then the live end that goes to whatever you're holding. That means you want the U-bolt on the dead end and the saddle on the live end. Never saddle a dead horse. If you're not sure, if you forget which is the saddle and which is the thing, it's the rider has nuts. And yes, I know, professional riggers out there, if you're buying all this stuff, there's something called a thimble that should be going in this loop. Basically, it's a half collar that holds it like so. It's called a thimble. You can buy it when you're buying all this other stuff. I don't have one laying around. We're not doing any overhead rigging. This is going to be okay for our application, but yes, it would be better if we had a thimble. All right, gang, she's back on Earth. I have to say that this was probably the most useful the lift has proven to be so far. There are certain things that it's helped out on, but like, it's been kind of a give and take. All of this stuff, just 1,000 times more convenient. Any one of these tasks wouldn't have been so bad on my back, but like crawling in and out for oil change, e-brake, the whole drive shaft bit, everything, this was just, I mean, it was way better. So, oh, the exhaust, we did that too. I'm actually trying to take a mental note because we've been at it for quite a while. So now, well, I guess I should pull the wheel chocks first. I don't know if the e-brake works yet, but we'll test all of this stuff. Basically, we're at testing point. There's more to do, but phase 1 is complete, assuming it passes the tests. Hope I didn't jinx anything. All right, we're in neutral. Test 1, foot's on the brake, obviously. Test 1's gonna be right as we start the car. Is it any quieter? Definitely is in the cab. I mean, you can hear the exhaust kind of echoing out of the back. I think we're gonna need a new belt soon though. That'll be on the list of phase 2. Now we do have to get this thing off the lift and not decapitate ourselves. Guess we're committed to it. Gang, I need to practice moving cars on and off the lift. And I have such different vehicles, like lengths and widths and tracks and whew. All right, well, it's moving. That means the drive shaft is holding for now, so that's pretty good news. Definitely have a little bit of an exhaust leak up front still, but it's way quieter. I'm not really sure. I mean, I'll bet it's from the same spot. I'm not sure why. Maybe it's the way that exhaust pipe is actually made. Just don't know. Ooh, does the e-brake work? Let's put it in gear. Whoa, it's holding. I mean, not great, but better than nothing, that's for sure. All right, gang, that's gonna do it. Good luck on your projects out there. Thanks for watching Between the Sharks. We'll see you next time. We got a lot to do. I mean, everything needs a little bit of work, but look at that. I'm gonna cover the motor just because it looks a little gloomy, but we are moving along. All right, we'll see you next time on Between the Sharks. Good luck on your projects out there. We got a lot to do, so there's gonna be a lot coming up. So consider hitting that subscribe button.